Reflecting on my life, it feels as though each chapter has been meticulously drafted, every event preordained. My upbringing in a tranquil suburban environment, where stability was paramount, shaped my expectations. My parents' enduring 5-decade marriage became the blueprint for my own vision of a successful partnership. I naturally anticipated a similar trajectory for myself, lasting affection, unwavering fidelity, and a bond impervious to the passage of time. Meeting Joyce at a friend's wedding seemed to signal the realization of that dream. For years, I believed we were constructing that ideal together. Joyce possessed a unique ability to illuminate the mundane, her laughter filling the voids in our daily routine. We raised 2 children, built a comfortable existence, and established traditions I hoped would endure. Yet recently, doubts had begun to surface, prompting me to scrutinize everything, searching for the point where things had diverged. Was I oblivious to the warning signs, or merely clinging too tightly to an illusion? I navigated my reliable Jeep Cherokee along the open highway, the familiar engine hum providing a constant backdrop to the intermittent chatter from the back seat. My 2 children were engrossed in their customary debate over movie choices, their voices a steady murmur. Beside me, Joyce, my wife of 20 years, gazed silently out the window, her expression veiled with an emotion I couldn't decipher. She was completely unaware of the impending change. Joyce has an ordinary appearance, not stunning, but pleasant. Her light brown hair framed her face, highlighting her blue eyes. While her legs were a little on the heavier side, I always found them appealing, as I did her full hips, a feature she perpetually, but unsuccessfully, attempted to minimize. She was slimmer up top, not my ideal, but inconsequential. I loved Joyce, imperfections and all, from the moment I first laid eyes on her 21 years ago. Back then, I was 20, and she was 22. I knew immediately she was the woman I would marry, but today would mark our last day together. The children were aware, but Joyce remained oblivious. We were en route to our favorite state park for one last family picnic before Brian departed for his sophomore year, and our daughter embarked on her senior year exchange program in Europe the following morning. I was ostensibly leaving for a business trip, but in reality, I was simply leaving. As the children became absorbed in their movie, we commenced the 2-hour drive. Joyce cherished these picnics, these escapes from the everyday hustle, opportunities to relish each other's company in a serene setting. She particularly favored this park because I never brought my Mustang. It wasn't suited for the uneven terrain, and its compact back seat couldn't accommodate the children. Joyce had always harbored a certain jealousy towards the Mustang, referring to it as my 3rd child, and later, my 2nd wife. I would joke that I required a 2nd wife, given her constant involvement in her various events and activities. I observed her relaxed countenance as we drove. Reaching for the radio, I switched it on. A Fleetwood Mac song began to play, and although I didn't instantly recognize it, the distinctive beat laid down by Mick Fleetwood and John McVie's prominent bass line soon revealed its identity. Years ago, I played guitar in heavy metal bands, and before that, my parents insisted I learn classical piano to instill discipline and structure. Music became an integral part of my life, sustaining me through challenging times. Even now, I can't begin my morning run without my iPod. The music I select dictates my mood and influences my daily choices, often mirroring my emotional state. This time, the song Little Lies by Fleetwood Mac, not a particular favorite, felt painfully apt. Just as Christine McVie began to sing, Joyce changed the station. If I could turn the page in time, I'd turn over in just a day or two. The lyrics flowed. Leave it, I told her. Close my eyes, echoed Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. Christine's voice sang of believing, a reflection of our own predicament. Tell me lies, filled the car, almost as if the band was present with us. In the rearview mirror, my daughter caught my eye. She understood the song's gravity. She returned to her movie, and Joyce looked out the window as I contemplated the meaning of those words. To me, to us, I had always loved Joyce deeply. She wasn't a breathtaking beauty, but her personality and optimistic spirit captivated me. When we met, our shared life led me to believe no one else could ever compare, until 2 weeks ago, when I uncovered her affair with Matt Blake. Christine's lyrics about turning back time resonated deeply. If I could, I would alter the day Joyce met Matt, and the day she first betrayed me. But I couldn't. So I gave her this day, one last perfect day, with the family she claimed to love. One more day, with the husband she had deceived. A final idyllic picnic at her favorite place, before everything crumbled. As I drove, she reached for my hand. "I love you, Bill," she said, smiling. Sometimes I forget to show it, but never doubt it. My daughter let out a sarcastic snort from the back seat. I couldn't discern if it was in response to her movie or her mother's words. The thought lingered. Sweet little lies. I think it's because you're all so busy with schoolwork and activities. I'm stuck at home feeling like I have no life. That's why my groups and charities matter so much, Joyce explained. Why not just get a dog, Mom? My daughter interjected. I remained silent, lost in how Stevie Nicks' voice could still send shivers down my spine after all these years. She still looked good, too, even at 50 or more. You understand, don't you, Bill? Joyce inquired. Sometimes you realize you can't just watch, you have to act. Oh, he understands more than you know. Jessica from the back seat declared, "No arguing today. Let's just enjoy this day together, Jess," I responded. "No fights, no negativity." Joyce nodded, a smile gracing her lips. Our eyes met in the rearview mirror. She bit her lip and conceded, "Okay." Joyce squeezed my hand and rested her head on my shoulder. She leaned in for a kiss, but I smoothly diverted my attention to the passing road sign, narrowly avoiding her lips. Jessica's giggle confirmed she'd noticed my maneuver. I had to maintain the facade of a devoted husband for the remainder of the day. Otherwise, this final gift to Joyce would be irrevocably tarnished. As we ate, I pondered her motivations. Had her love for me diminished? Or had she always treated me differently than I treated her? Perhaps, as she'd claimed, we were all consumed by our busy lives, though she, by choice, was not. She had opted out of the rat race, embracing the role of a stay-at-home wife. Joyce had selected our house, the cars, the children's schools. She orchestrated our vacations and meticulously planned our lives. If she was unhappy, she could have voiced her discontent. I also dwelled on Matt Blake. What did he possess that I lacked? Was it merely his youth, although his receding hairline belied his 35 years? I was 40, hardly a significant difference. I wasn't an Olympic athlete, but I maintained a reasonable level of fitness. Matt, conversely, was out of shape. So, physical appearance was likely not the deciding factor. Thankfully, after my suspicions were validated by investigators, a DNA test confirmed my paternity, though it was evident in Brian's striking resemblance to my younger self. Brian, at his age, had already found his intended Maggie Chu, a petite Asian girl he met at school. I wondered if he trusted her implicitly after our conversation regarding his mother. Unlike Jessica and me, Brian struggled to conceal his emotions. He loved Joyce deeply, but seethed with anger, unable to bring himself to speak to her. Jessica, on the other hand, was a simmering volcano of rage, barely containing her desire for a confrontation. She posed my greatest concern for the day. Jessica had pledged to behave during the picnic, but I doubted her ability to maintain composure for the entire duration. She'd instructed me to depart after my own exit tomorrow, and I anticipated a dramatic aftermath. She harbored no respect for her mother, and had already expressed her desire to live with me upon her return from Paris in the spring. I assured her she was always welcome, but at 17, a judge would likely have the final say during the divorce proceedings. The word divorce stung, its mere syllables capable of dismantling everything we had built, inflicting pain more profound than any physical blow. Arriving at the park, I paid the entrance fee. Maybe we should get those annual passes that allow us entry without paying, Joyce suggested. With the kids gone, I don't think we'll be here much, I countered. This is our favorite spot, Joyce insisted. We should come as often as we can, just the two of us, like always. Of course, I replied skeptically. She smiled. There's no one I'd rather be here with. Yet even as she spoke, I could almost hear Stevie Nicks' soulful voice singing, "Tell Me Lies." Within minutes, we were unloading food, blankets, and supplies. Jess, don't place the blanket too close to the grill, I called out. Okay, Dad, she cheerfully responded. I only moved it closer to Mom because she was cold. No, honey, I didn't say that, Joyce corrected. Jessica, now beside me, whispered just loud enough for me to hear. I was getting used to the weather in hell. I turned to Jessica, realizing the profound impact our family's disintegration was having on the children. I knew I was heartbroken, but they were suffering too. Brian had Maggie for emotional support, but even their relationship was strained by Joyce's actions, eroding his trust in Maggie and fueling his suspicion of her activities. Jessica, my little girl, was clearly grappling with intense anger. I needed to speak with the program director about arranging therapy for her and strengthening our connection. I also needed to move from my current apartment to a house. Dad, ready for our stone-throwing contest at the lake? Brian inquired. It was our tradition, and while he had consistently won until he turned 16, I had ceased letting him win after that. Lately, his throws were nearing my own in power. Perhaps this year, he would finally triumph. Later, champ, I replied. Let's get the grill going first. He nodded, smiling, and pulled out his phone to call Maggie. Dad, there's no signal here, he said, frustrated. I just laughed. Brian, let's race to the lake, Jessica shouted, sprinting off before Brian even registered her challenge. For now, I was alone, facing the moment I had dreaded all day. Joyce spread out a blanket and gestured for me to join her. I need to get the grill started, I said, but save me a spot. I've been looking forward to this all morning. My acting was improving. Joyce wasn't the only one capable of weaving convincing falsehoods. What transpired next was one of my most convincing performances. Joyce blew me a kiss. I caught it, pretending to touch my face with it, while subtly discarding and stepping on it. She didn't notice, smiling instead. I wonder what you'd do with a real kiss, she mused. We'll find out later, I replied. Those small lies were becoming infectious. I'm going to look for wildflowers, she announced. Have something ready when I get back, and if you see Jess, send her to join me. She loves picking flowers. I nodded as she walked away. She paused and turned back. Bill, she said, I'm so glad you insisted I come today. There's nowhere I'd rather be. We need more time like this. Life has gotten so hectic, and we take each other for granted because we think we'll always be here. Let's go back to doing things. Together, she finished, walking off with a smile to gather wildflowers. It was the sweetest lie I'd ever heard. A tear traced a path down my cheek as I recalled the depth of my love for her, knowing that without my insistence, she would likely be with Matt right now. I set up the charcoal in one of the park grills, dousing it with lighter fluid. Self-igniting ones never worked. The familiar routine allowed my mind to wander. I remembered weeping while watching the DVD the detectives had provided, alone in my office, while Joyce attended a charity meeting. I saw Matt arrive at our house a few days prior, while the kids and I were out. Charity starts at home, I thought bitterly. Joyce, after ensuring no one was watching, eagerly pulled him inside. The living room camera captured them on our couch, drinking coffee, the tension palpable. They exchanged small talk, making me wonder why Matt tolerated it. Then Joyce made the first move, obliterating any possibility of forgiveness. She asked if her legs looked fat, mentioning that I loved them, but she felt they were old and heavy. He replied that he couldn't judge from what he saw, and she lifted her skirt higher. What I see looks good, Matt said with lust, but it's hard to judge with incomplete information. Want to see the whole thing? Joyce teased, smiling. I knew from her expression what would follow. She raised her skirt completely. "Oh, God," Matt muttered. "Come and get it," Joyce invited. Matt leaned in, and their awkward, clumsy movements commenced. There was no grace, just an uncoordinated mess that bordered on comical. I wondered if, caught in their passion, they realized how ridiculous they appeared. Did Matt comprehend the consequences of his actions? He likely had no idea what was coming in 24 hours. As for Joyce, I hoped she would find happiness in her new life. I resolved to handle this with grace, devoid of primal reactions. The better man had won. My sole priority was ensuring my children's security before stepping away. My lawyers would deliver the divorce and settlement terms. No negotiations. Joyce would accept my offer or receive nothing. I offered Joyce very little in the settlement. If we endured a full-blown divorce, her reputation would be utterly destroyed. I would ensure her standing in the community was decimated, forcing her resignation from her committees and charities. The kids would remain unaffected. Brian would be across the country at school, and Jessica would be in Paris. It would be easiest for Joyce to accept my terms and move on, as would I. That day, sitting in my den, so engrossed was I in the scene unfolding on the screen that I didn't hear Jessica enter until she stood directly behind me. She gently wiped the tears from my face. "Now you know," she whispered. I nodded silently, speechless. "I wanted to tell you, Dad," Jessica confessed, but I couldn't do it without hurting you." "How long have you known?" I managed to ask, my voice strained. "Since the beginning," she revealed. "They flirted for months, but it only lasted 2 weeks. I overheard Mom telling Susan she was going to end it, so it should be over soon." "It's too late," I said, the weight of my words heavy between us. "Things changed the moment it started." "Can't you forgive her, Dad?" Jessica's eyes pleaded, hopeful yet wary. "Sorry, Angel," I admitted. "I'm not the forgiving type." A small, bitter smile touched her lips. "Good," she said. "I'm not going to forgive her either." "Jessica, we need to handle this calmly," I stated firmly. "Don't tell anyone or treat your mother differently." "A penny for your thoughts," Joyce's voice startled me. I hadn't heard her approach. "Maybe don't light this yet," she said, noticing the soaked coals. I grabbed my second bag, removed the saturated briquettes, tossed them into the lake to prevent a fire hazard, and placed the fresh coals in the grill, lightly sprinkling them with fluid before igniting them. "Come sit with me while we wait for the fire," Joyce said, smiling. I sat beside her, and she took my hand. "Bill, on the way here, I had a thought," she began. "We haven't discussed this, but we're starting a new chapter. We've had a great life so far, and I'm looking forward to the next phase. I don't think it's over yet." I stared at her blankly, not comprehending her point. Truthfully, I just wanted to be as far away from her as possible. I probably shouldn't have let my mind replay that video of her and Matt. Just looking at her made me nauseous. "All right, honey. I can tell you're confused," she continued. "Being here, with the people I care about most, has given me a new perspective. And to be honest, what Jess said made me think. Our kids have grown up and moved out, and I felt old, unattractive, and useless. I guess I needed to bring some excitement back into my life." I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this woman truly about to confess to an affair? I'd never encountered anything like this before. What about my plans? What about my revenge? This ruined everything. So I joined all these pointless committees, thinking they'd make me feel better. But they only pushed us further apart. Whether we like it or not, we've grown distant over the past few weeks. I muttered, feigning contemplation. "Just get to the part where you admit to sleeping with the bald 35-year-old janitor who still lives with his mother," I thought. "It's been 2 weeks since we've had sex, you know," she said, looking for a reaction. Of course, I thought. Why on earth would I touch you after seeing that video with Matt? "No, honey, I hadn't noticed," I said, playing along. My own eyes narrowed. "Well, I know you've been waiting for the day we could run around the house without clothes," she said. You You always joke about burning my clothes so I'd always be naked for whenever you want me, she smiled. That'll have to wait until hell freezes over, I thought. We're not old enough to retire just yet, Bill, she said with a smile. I love you, and I want us to have another child. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. I started choking and coughing. Joyce patted my back, trying to help me catch my breath. A whirlwind of thoughts raced through my mind. Maybe she was already pregnant with Matt's child and wanted to pin it on me. I dismissed that. It was too soon to tell. Maybe she planned to get pregnant by Matt and pretend it was mine. Maybe she felt guilty and wanted to revive our sex life, which she had knowingly wrecked. I didn't know. I didn't care. I just wanted to get through this last day and then move on. Surprisingly, Christine McVie's song popped into my head, and I found the answer there. The second verse goes, even though I don't make plans, I hope you understand, there's a reason why. Joyce, let's not make plans right now. I hope you understand. There's a reason I don't want to plan anything at the moment, I said, echoing the song's lyrics. Oh, you want me all to yourself for a bit, she said with a smile. That's so selfish. Have you been having naughty thoughts about what we'll do when the kids leave? I just nodded and smiled. Like the song says, we'd be better off breaking up. Let's give that a try. Lately, Joyce brought out the worst in me. She placed my hand over her heart and pulled it to her chest. Right on cue, Jessica appeared. Are we going to grill anything or what? She asked. Dad, should my stomach suffer because of your hormones all day? I nodded, thankful for her interruption, and went to the grill. I put hot dogs, burgers, steaks, and some chicken breasts on it, along with a couple of salmon fillets wrapped in foil. Maybe I understand why you want just the two of us for a bit, Joyce said, sneaking up on me again. Dad, the lake's waiting, Brian called. I shrugged and followed him, Jessica trailing behind as the self-appointed judge. Brian's first stone almost hit a log some kids had dragged to the middle of the lake. It was a solid throw, and he grinned. Top that, Dad, he said, smiling. I picked up a rock, still thinking of Matt's bald head and pale face. When I threw it, I pictured punching him square in the face. Whoa, Dad, Brian shouted. Where did that come from? Your rock flew over the log. It went halfway across the lake. Both he and Jessica stared at me, surprised. Let's eat, I said, trying to sound upbeat. We shouldn't leave your mom alone for too long. Yeah, or we might catch her with the forester, Jessica joked. I was startled, but Brian just laughed. Back at our picnic site, only the hot dogs were ready, so Brian ate those. After lunch, Brian announced he was full and went to nap in the Jeep. Joyce wanted to show Jessica the wildflowers, but Jessica asked me to walk with her instead. Joyce, never one for hiking, set off to pick her flowers alone. As we walked, I tried to explain to Jess that what was happening between Joyce and me had nothing to do with her. I told her that we would always be her parents and that we both loved her. I also tried to make her understand that her mother would need her support in the days ahead because it would be hard for her when she realized I was gone. Why should I help the woman who destroyed our family? Jessica asked. I didn't really have an answer, so I just said, because she's your mother, and you love her. Dad, men don't notice anything, Jess said. If there's something right in front of them, they don't see it unless it's work, football, or cars. But girls and women notice the smallest things. Probably half the girls I know see it too. It's embarrassing. I stopped and just looked at her. I love you, Daddy, she said. In the spring, when I come home from school, and during Christmas break, I'll come stay with you. The rest of the day flew by. We played family games, tossed a frisbee, and looked at the clouds, trying to spot shapes. We ate a lot, and even accompanied Joyce to see her favorite wildflowers. When we were tired from picking flowers, we returned to our picnic site for dinner. My son almost ruined everything himself. It's hard to believe we'll never do this again, Brian said. Of course we will, Joyce said. And Brian, Jess, and I stared at her in shock. But what I meant was, Brian tried to correct himself. I know what you meant, honey, Joyce said. Maybe next time you can bring Maggie, and maybe Jessica will bring someone too. Then maybe you and Maggie will make me a grandmother. But we'll always come here. It's a family tradition." She nudged me with her elbow and added, "So that might make it even better." Brian smiled, relieved he hadn't spilled the secret. Joyce leaned in to kiss me, not noticing the angry look Jessica shot at her older brother. I've lost count of how many times I've kissed Joyce over the years, but this kiss felt different. It was like the sadness in Brian's words made her put more into it, as if she believed our entire relationship depended on this one moment. "Have you thought about my proposal?" she asked, her eyes full of hope. Her eyes were so full of love, adoration, and passion that for a split second I almost forgot my anger. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. When I looked into Joyce's eyes, I saw love. For a fleeting moment, I thought about having one last night with her. Maybe her wish could come true. But then I realized that if she got pregnant, I'd never be able to walk away from my child. Besides, I hated the idea of her raising my child in Matt's mom's basement. As we loaded the Jeep, the sky darkened. We yawned as we set off for home. The return trip would take longer since we needed to drop Brian at the airport. He was catching a red-eye flight back to college to spend an extra day with Maggie before classes resumed. Maggie had already returned that afternoon, and I didn't think she knew he was coming. I suspected Brian wanted to surprise her late at night to see if she was there and, more importantly, if she was alone. Damn Joyce for shattering our children's lives with her deceit. Her insecurities and boredom had caused so much damage. None of us would ever be the same. Our family was broken. I truly hoped Matt was worth it. "Can you drive, sweetheart?" Joyce asked. "I'm fine," I replied. I just have a lot on my mind." "Oh," she said. "Have we made a decision?" I was thinking about other things, but I decided one more sweet lie wouldn't hurt. I wanted to make her as happy as possible for this last day together. The whole point of today was to capture a glimpse of the life we should have had, to create one last memory of the love that had defined most of our adult lives. "I'm trying to think of names," I whispered. Her expression was priceless, a mixture of love, adoration, and passion, the look she always gave me until 2 weeks ago when she started her affair with Matt. After that, all I saw was guilt and doubt. "Are we starting tonight, baby?" she whispered. "We should probably wait until I get back from my trip the day after tomorrow," I said. "We don't want Jessica to hear us, and that would be awkward." As we drove and eventually stopped at the airport, I felt conflicted. Joyce seemed like her old self again. The way she kept holding my hand showed that, despite everything, she still loved me. Maybe, as she suggested, it was just boredom and loneliness that had made her lose sight of what truly mattered. Was this a forgivable mistake in a strong marriage that I was blowing up due to my pride and insecurities? I needed to sort out my feelings. Most men, myself included, don't process emotions well. Women do. Men react on instinct first, then analyze and follow logic. My first instinct was to cut Joyce out of my life completely, and my logical side told me that if she did it once and got away with it, she'd probably do it again. Both instinct and logic were urging me to move on, no matter what my heart said. I wasn't willing to spend my life at the mercy of her whims. Life's too short not to be happy. At the airport, Joyce and Jess dozed off while I dropped Brian off. I slipped him some cash, even though he already had a debit card for expenses. I hugged him tightly. "Dad, don't forget to email me as soon as you know which office you're transferring to. Jess and I are planning on going to Hawaii. I'll bring Maggie for Christmas, but we'll be at her parents' for Thanksgiving. That should give you time to get the new place ready," he said. "But keep me posted. Thanksgiving on the beach sounds awesome, Brian." "What if your mom and I are still together?" I asked. He gave me a skeptical look. "Then Christmas will probably be awkward with you checking under the tree to see if her boyfriend left her gifts, or if she invited him over, counting chairs at the table, and constantly watching the chimney to make sure she's not flirting with Santa Claus. I love you, Dad. Just do what you need to do. We'll support you whatever you decide." He gently stroked Jessica's head and kissed her lightly. Don't tell her I did that, he said with a grin, then walked to the terminal, no longer just my son, but a grown man. I got back in the car and started driving home. Joyce, half asleep, reached for my hand, and Jessica snored softly in the back. Even in her sleep, Joyce instinctively reached for me. "Love you, Billy," she murmured. This only deepened my confusion. How could a woman tell me she loved me, even in her sleep? Could that be faked? Another thing struck me. The way she acted around Matt was different from how she was with me. Maybe she was pretending with him, or had she been pretending with me for nearly 20 years? Was I really about to throw away 20 years of our lives because she'd slept with some loser twice? I started doubting my plan. It felt cowardly to leave without telling her why. Even a dog gets a newspaper smack to know not to mess up. Didn't Joyce deserve an explanation after 20 years? Didn't she deserve a chance to respond? Maybe it was my rational side coming through. The best way might be to make some coffee, invite Matt over, and have an adult conversation. What on earth was I thinking? She cheated. She didn't deserve anything. "Wake me up when we get to the airport so I can say goodbye to Brian," she mumbled. We left the airport 20 minutes ago," I said. "We'll be home in about 15 minutes. Joyce's eyes widened. "Brian's gone?" she asked. I nodded. "But he didn't even say goodbye to me," she said, clearly hurt. "He kissed me goodbye," Jessica said, twisting the knife. "It's hard to pretend to sleep when your monkey brother's licking you. I guess that's his way of showing love." "Go back to sleep, Jess," I said. Her smirk in the rearview mirror showed she had gotten what she wanted. "He knew you were tired, honey," I told Joyce. "He wanted to let you rest. He knows you'll have to work even harder on those committees since you took today off to be with us." "I need to be with you," she said. "No committees, no charity events, no projects, just the one we're going to do together." Was this just another lie? Or was she being honest? I pulled into the driveway, carrying Jessica to her room. "Love you, Daddy," she murmured softly. "Forever and ever," I replied, tucking her into bed. As I turned to leave, she suddenly said, "Don't forget to call me when my plane lands. I want to hear how she reacts." Her eyes were wide open now, alert and focused. "And Dad," she added, "I'll live with you. In our state, kids over 13 can choose which parent they want to live with. I'm 17, so pick Hawaii. I look great in a bikini. Claudia and I got along great," which made me wonder why she brought her up. "Jess, if you weren't asleep, why did I need to carry you upstairs?" I asked. "Because today is the last time for some things," she said softly. "I remember being little and feeling so safe when you carried me up those steps and tucked me in. After tonight, we'll never be in this house again, so I wanted to feel that one last time." I nodded, understanding. "Maybe it'll be another house, or maybe someday you'll see me carrying my granddaughter up the stairs in your house," I said. "Yes, that would be great, Dad. And you can tell her why she doesn't have a grandmother," she said bitterly. "Who knows," I replied. "Maybe we can still fix this." "No, Dad," she said firmly. "You can't. You're not that person. And if you were, you wouldn't be the dad I love and respect. It's time for you to start fresh with someone who truly loves you. Maybe someone's already waiting for you." I left Jessica and returned to the car, where Joyce was still snoring. I opened the door and lifted her out. Her arms instinctively wrapped around my neck as I carried her to our room. After laying her on the bed, I undressed her, covered her with a blanket, and kissed her one last time. "Love you, Billy," she murmured as I lay down beside her. Was it true, or just a sweet lie? It didn't seem to matter anymore. "Love you too, Joyce," I said, as the last tear I'd ever shed for her rolled down my cheek. Lying in the bed we'd shared since the beginning of our marriage, I couldn't help but feel the weight of symbolism. The questions swirled in my mind. Was I being rational? Should we try to fix things? Did I love her enough to even want to try? Had she and Matt been in this bed? The thought made me furious. Had she really chosen that loser over me? Or had he just been there when she was vulnerable? I'd worked tirelessly to give her everything, and this was how she repaid me. Somehow, I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by dreams of Joyce and Matt living in my house with my kids, while I was stuck in his mother's basement. Before sunrise, I was up. Showered, dressed, and packed, I filled my suitcase with personal belongings. Quietly, I walked down the hall to hug my daughter goodbye. "I love you, Dad," Jessica said, forcing herself awake. "The adventure begins. See you in a couple of months, or maybe sooner. Say hi to Claudia for me." Jessica would head to the airport in a few hours. After that, Joyce would be alone for the first time in her life. I hoped Matt could make her happy. The surprises I had planned for them would certainly test their love. I climbed into my Mustang, took one last look at the house, and started the car. The powerful engine roared as a part of me felt sad. The end of my marriage felt like a failure, but I was ready for whatever came next. On the way to the airport, I called the office. I planned to leave a message for Claudia, my former assistant, but couldn't reach her voicemail. Instead, the main office line connected me to a live person. "This is Ellen Magnuson, telephone operator and receptionist," she said. I was shocked to hear someone working at 6 a.m. "I'm always here at this time," she added. "Ellen, I need to leave a message for Claudia Denton," I said. "Claudia no longer works here," Ellen replied. "She left yesterday." "Where did she transfer to?" I asked. "I don't have that information," she answered. I was stunned. Claudia had been like a second wife to me for the past 10 years. I'd hired her fresh out of college, and she was the perfect assistant. I regretted taking her for granted. I'd been too preoccupied with my issues with Joyce to appreciate her. I decided to take a few days to find out where she'd gone and get in touch. After resolving that, I drove to the transport company I'd contracted. Naturally, I chose their Honolulu office for my transfer, not because of Jessica's influence, though it would make her happy. I handed off my Mustang at the transport facility near the airport. It would be shipped to the coast and ferried to the island, arriving about a day after me. Taking a shuttle to the terminal, I checked in and waited for my flight. About 15 minutes later, a woman sat beside me. Without looking up from my magazine, I caught a familiar, pleasant scent. Her legs were slim and well-toned, less thick than Joyce's, but likely more attractive to most men. My gaze traveled to her small waist and curvy figure. "It's not polite to stare at a stranger's chest," she said. "Besides, aren't you married?" "I was," I replied. "Now I'm open to new opportunities." "Shouldn't you be at work, Claudia?" She smiled. "You were the best boss anyone could ask for." "I know," she said, grinning. "But now I'm open to new possibilities." "Claudia, you didn't need to leave the company because of me," I started. "I didn't leave," she interrupted. "I just transferred to where you're headed." "How did you know when I was leaving and where I was going?" I asked, surprised. "I initially managed all your documents," I reminded her with a smile. She responded, "Jessica filled me in on the situation. She believes we could be compatible and didn't want you to endure this ordeal alone." I eyed her skeptically, but she simply smiled. "Bill," she confessed, "I've desired to be more than just your assistant for quite some time. Don't I deserve an opportunity as well? I'm not proposing marriage or a serious relationship, just a chance to see where things lead, one day at a time." I grinned and extended my hand, and Joyce was roused from sleep by the phone's persistent ringing. It went to voicemail after the third ring, indicating the early morning caller was determined to speak. She pondered why Bill wasn't answering. He should be awake by now, preparing for his airport departure. She had been immersed in a delightful dream about what she planned to do to Bill upon his return. It was astonishing that she had successfully concealed her affair with Matt. She had it all: a husband who provided for her extravagant lifestyle and a younger lover who adored her. Life was flawless. "Hello?" she answered curtly. "Joyce, it's Matt," the voice on the other end announced. "I can't make it today. Maybe never," he mumbled drunkenly. Damn, he was already intoxicated at this hour, she thought. Forget it. She had resolved to terminate things with Matt yesterday anyway. There was no future with him. She loved Bill profoundly. The picnic had reaffirmed that. Now that they were planning to have another child, she didn't need the distraction Matt represented. It had simply been a midlife crisis. Perhaps there would be others, but as long as she remained discreet, Bill would never find out. "I love you, Joyce," Matt declared, his voice cracking with emotion. "Are you crying, Matt?" she inquired. Great. Just what I needed, she thought. This fool is making the breakup difficult. Some people can't accept when a relationship is over and try to cling on forever because of their own desires. He needs to let go. It's finished. Joyce, I feel awful, he whined. What's the matter, Matt? She asked out of politeness. Are you unwell? Injured? She was relieved her husband wasn't as pathetic as Matt. What had she ever seen in him? He lacked attractiveness, fitness, intelligence, ambition, and still lived with his mother. And he was terrible in bed. She had initially chosen him because their relationship would arouse no suspicion, and he posed no threat to Bill. She had believed she could train him to satisfy her, but before things became serious, she realized she loved Bill too deeply to proceed with the affair. My mom is going to kill me, Matt blurted out. We have a problem, Joyce. I love you, but I can't endure this anymore. It's not worth it. What are you talking about? Joyce asked, now irritated. This morning, I went in for my shift at the supermarket. I thought I could earn an extra $10 helping unload trucks, Matt explained. I intended to use the money to buy you a present, to demonstrate how much I care. But when I arrived, they summoned me to the manager's office. His voice trembled. He informed me that they have a policy against employees fraternizing with customers, particularly married ones, and that they had to terminate my employment to prevent a lawsuit. I lost my job, Joyce. I had worked there since high school, and they simply dismissed me. He started sobbing again. As I cycled home, I began to wonder if someone had discovered our affair and was attempting to cause trouble. I had just passed the alley behind the store and started pedaling faster when, unexpectedly, a large teenager emerged from the alley and struck me with such force that I fell off my bike. When I got up, he and my bike were gone. I made my way home, but shortly afterward, 2 large men assaulted me, beating me severely. Throughout the attack, they repeatedly stated that I should have known better than to become involved with a married woman. I regained consciousness in the hospital, with my mother by my side. She instructed me to contact you and tell you to stay away from me, Joyce. But I will always love you. The call abruptly ended. Joyce was left with a dial tone and a mix of relief and guilt over Matt's ordeal. She was convinced Matt's mother was responsible. It seemed like her version of tough love. Upon discovering Joyce was married, she had taken it upon herself to teach her son a lesson. Instead of grounding him or revoking privileges, she had him fired, orchestrated the theft of his bike, and since he was too old for a spanking, hired thugs to assault him. Perhaps this was for the best, she reflected, as her heart belonged solely to the man who truly mattered to her. There was no room for Matt in her life. She decided to prepare breakfast. Maybe she would drive Jessica to the airport herself. Jess wanted to demonstrate her independence by taking a taxi, but they needed time to reconnect. Joyce had sensed some tension between them during the picnic and wanted to address it. Until recently, they had been a close family, but now something felt amiss. At least things seemed better with Bill. Yesterday had been perfect, and she had made every effort to express her unwavering love for him. After weeks of toying with the idea of an affair, she felt confident he trusted her again. As Joyce entered the kitchen, she noticed a large envelope on the table. Just as she began to open it, a car horn sounded outside. She glanced out the window and saw a taxi waiting. Joyce opened the envelope as she heard footsteps descending the stairs. Jessica was coming down. As Joyce read the note inside, a chill ran down her spine. Press play on your DVD player, then read page 2, it instructed. Joyce pressed play and watched in horror as footage of her most recent encounter with Matt played on the living room TV. Jessica walked by and said, "Goodbye, Mom. I hope you enjoyed your last day with Dad. He wanted you to have this. A bittersweet memory. But you won't see him or me again." Joyce reread the letter. Initially, she believed it came from Matt's mother, but as she continued, her deepest fears materialized. "Goodbye, Joyce. I hope Matt was worth sacrificing your husband, your marriage, and your family. My love for you was profound, and your betrayal shattered me. In a few moments, someone will arrive with divorce papers. Sign them immediately upon receipt. If you sign, we will proceed with an uncontested divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. My lawyer will contact you regarding custody arrangements for Jessica. You'll receive 25% of our joint assets, including the house, which is already listed for sale. You have 30 days to find a new residence. I sincerely hope Matt has space for you in his basement. Should you refuse to sign, I will tarnish your reputation so severely that remaining in this town will be impossible. The financial settlement is generous considering the life we had, a life you destroyed for reasons I cannot comprehend. I have no desire to see, hear from, or speak to you ever again, so I'll never understand your motives, and it no longer matters. Yesterday was a mix of joy and sorrow, and I struggled to see if we could salvage our relationship. I thought forgiveness might be possible, and my love for you, Joyce, never ceased. However, I cannot forget your actions. I'll never trust you again. I couldn't live with the constant doubt, wondering if meetings or shopping trips were pretexts to meet someone else. You've done this repeatedly, haven't you, Joyce? Perhaps not with Zex until recently, but you lied to my face, kissed me, and ultimately betrayed me. It wasn't a lack of affection or my unwillingness to forgive that ended our marriage. It was the deceit, all those sweet little lies. Joyce felt an emptiness wash over her after reading the letter. She never anticipated or desired this outcome. The affair had stemmed solely from boredom. Her lifelong aspiration was to be a wife and mother, and when she met Bill in college, she felt her dreams had come true. But as she aged, she sensed life slipping away, the past few years being particularly challenging. The children were nearly grown. Brian already was, and Jessica was close. They no longer needed her. Bill had his career, and despite making choices to limit work-related travel to spend more time with the family, he was away every weekday. He had Claudia, who managed everything for him at work so efficiently that Joyce never had to assist with anything related to his job. After Claudia's initial couple of years working for Bill, Joyce's jealousy intensified to the point where she stopped inviting her to parties and social events. It didn't help that Claudia was younger and more attractive. One of Joyce's most significant frustrations arose at a company dinner when someone asked, "Are Bill and Claudia married? They look great together." Another person added, "And they work so well together, too." Joyce began to suspect Bill might be having an affair with Claudia. The way Claudia looked at Bill convinced Joyce that, given the opportunity, Claudia would pursue him. Joyce hired a private investigator to uncover the truth. After 3 months, and spending a substantial portion of the money her late father had left her on 24-hour surveillance, the agency concluded that Bill and Claudia's relationship was purely professional and amicable. There was nothing more between them. Joyce felt a conflict between relief and frustration. She had squandered so much money to confirm what she had always known. Bill was faithful. He loved her and their children too much to jeopardize their family. Yet she sometimes questioned why he loved her so deeply. Most of the time, Joyce knew she was intelligent, but she also knew she wasn't the embodiment of male fantasies. Her chest was average at best, she had a large backside, and her legs were so thick she needed custom-made boots. But Bill adored those traits. He would often whisper, "Wrap those thick legs around me while we make love." His desire for her seemed insatiable until 2 weeks ago. Suddenly she realized she hadn't been discreet at all. Bill had probably known her suspicions from the outset, and she had been too naive to see it. She felt lost. She heard the sound of a car door closing outside. Looking out the window, she saw the taxi driver shutting the trunk after loading Jessica's suitcases. If anyone knew Bill's whereabouts and how to reach him, it was Jessica. She and her father shared a close bond. Bill loved their son, but he cherished their daughter, and she loved him just as intensely. Perhaps that's why Jessica had been so cold and sharp with Joyce lately. It was evident she knew about Joyce's betrayal and expressed her disapproval through her frosty demeanor and biting comments. "Jessica, wait!" Joyce called as her daughter stepped into the taxi. Jessica turned, looked at her mother, and simply raised her middle finger. Without a word, she got in and shut the door. The taxi drove off, and Joyce, still in her robe, ran after it down the street. She stepped on a sharp rock and cut her leg. Hobbling back to the house just as she reached her front door, she heard a whistle from a neighbor's house. The old man across the street waved. "I need your help," Joyce said, pulling her robe closed. "Can I use your phone? You've had your cheap thrill looking, so you owe me that." The old man stood and walked to his house. Joyce followed, still glancing around, wary of any eyes on her. "The phone's there," the old man said. Joyce found the phone book under the table where the phone sat. She reached for it, but before she could open it, he closed it. She stared at him in surprise. "What?" she asked. "I have a question for you," he replied. She nodded for him to continue. "What's the opposite of good?" "It's bad," she said. "No," he answered. "The opposite of good is better. I had a good life, and I ruined it trying to make it get better." He handed her a key. "What's this?" she asked, examining it. "The key to your house. Your husband gave it to me to water your plants and pick up your mail while you were on vacation." Joyce looked at him and said, "Thank you." She hurried back across the street and unlocked her door. She went straight to the phone and called Bill's cell. It went to voicemail. She wanted to leave a message, but didn't know what to say. She knew she had limited opportunities to tell him how sorry she was. She decided she would leave a message later, once she gathered her thoughts. If she accepted Bill's terms, she would be financially secure for a while. Their house was worth over $300,000, and 25% of that would be $75,000. It would sustain her temporarily, but it wasn't enough for long-term survival. She'd need to find a job and a new home. The money wouldn't last. Buying a comparable house would deplete her share within a couple of years, and her savings would run dry shortly after. Joyce had never worked. What could she even do? Her life was falling apart over nothing. She needed a way to get Bill to forgive her. The doorbell rang, and she stood up to answer it. "Joyce Williams?" asked a young woman with a briefcase. "Yes," Joyce said, wondering what she was selling. "You've been served," the woman said. "What?" Joyce said. "No, it's too soon. I'm not ready. I don't know what to do." "I need to return these papers with your signature," the woman said, looking bored. Joyce thought about everything she had done and all the people she had hurt with her careless actions. If Bill had publicly tarnished her reputation, more people would have been affected. She did the only thing she could do. She signed the papers. She closed the door behind the woman and collapsed at her desk, crying uncontrollably. 2 days and 4,563 miles later, Claudia stepped out of their hotel bathroom and touched Bill's shoulder as he cried over what Joyce had thrown away. "Things will get better, dear," she said, trying to comfort him, though she knew most people never truly forget their first marriage or the other parent of their children. In time, she and Bill would build a life together, maybe even have more children, but Joyce would always be a memory. So telling him it would get better was a little lie. On December 24th, Joyce walked through her old neighborhood, ignored by former friends and neighbors. Even her best friend's next-door neighbor avoided her while putting up Christmas decorations. Bill had kept his promise not to spread what she did, but Matt's mother told everyone, painting Joyce as the older woman who seduced her son. The gossip spread quickly, leaving Joyce an outcast, only approached by unwanted suitors. Joyce knocked on the door of her last friend, an old lonely man who welcomed her in. "Trouble loves company, eh, Joyce?" he said. "Weren't you supposed to have your kids over for the holidays?" "I hoped so," Joyce replied bitterly. In just 3 months she had become a stranger to herself, a far cry from the woman who had cheated on Bill. "Brian's grown now," she continued. "He and his fiancée decided to spend Christmas with Bill in Hawaii. They're enjoying the beach. He said he loved the idea of Christmas on the sand, with the whole ocean to throw stones into with his dad and Jessica. The court ruled we alternate holidays, so I had Thanksgiving, and Bill got Christmas. Jessica asked to spend part of her holiday with Brian and Maggie, so she'll be with them for New Year's." Dan, who had been listening intently, raised an eyebrow. "So, Jessica didn't care?" Joyce snapped. She came because the court ordered it. She arrived Wednesday, went straight to bed, barely spoke Thursday, and left right after dinner. She flew to Hawaii, not back to Paris to join them. I only found out when I called Brian and spoke to Maggie, who didn't know to keep it quiet. Joyce's eyes welled up. Maggie said it was the first time they'd all been together since Thanksgiving. They celebrated on Friday when Jess got there, even watching recorded football games together. I invited Bill to Thanksgiving, imagining him lonely, but instead, Maggie mentioned how great Claudia looked in a bikini. They celebrated on the deck of the house Bill bought for them. Claudia, not only built like a model, is also an amazing cook. She paused, biting her lip. I must be clairvoyant. I always knew that woman wanted Bill, so I hired detectives to watch them. They never met, and wouldn't have if I hadn't pushed him to her. I sent Bill a Christmas gift to remind him I was still here, but it was returned unopened, with a big green sticker saying, "Parcels from this address are not accepted." Joyce's voice dropped. I called Bill's cell, which he had given me for discussing Jessica's matters, since we share custody, though she chose to live with him. He waived child support because I don't work, which I thought was kind at first. But really, it was so he wouldn't have to speak to me. He avoids any contact. Jessica's court-ordered visits are all I have, but she barely speaks or interacts when she's here. Joyce continued. I called Bill's phone, and Claudia answered. I knew he was there, and had handed her the phone. I heard Christmas music and people chatting, clearly having a good time. I asked Claudia if she was still Bill's assistant. I would never work for anyone else, she said. I asked what else she does for him, and she said, whatever he wants. I almost cried but tried to be gracious. I asked if they got the gift I sent, and she said it might have been lost in the mail, downplaying it to spare my feelings. Then I realized I was on speakerphone because when I asked for Jessica, I heard her whisper, "No." I swallowed my pride and asked if I could visit for Christmas with their gifts. Claudia just said, "Oh, wait, there's Jessica." Jess took the phone, and I told her I hadn't heard from her in a month. She said she'd been busy with school. When I asked what she wanted for Christmas, she said, nothing. She told me she wanted me to keep being the best mom I could, and her dad and stepmom would handle the rest. Even though Bill isn't married to Claudia, she's already more of a mother to Jessica than I am. My own mom blames me too, always saying I was out of my mind. Maybe it was a midlife crisis, hormonal imbalance, or temporary insanity. Bill loves you, my mom said. Give him time. But time is running out, and he's moving on now. My mother blames me for not seeing her grandchildren. Claudia even flew my mom to Hawaii for Christmas, since Bill's parents were there for Thanksgiving. Maggie meant the entire family when she said everyone would be together. Joyce's voice grew faint. Deep down, I believe Bill still loves me. That's why he hasn't married Claudia yet, but he's trying to forget me. He's with a younger, prettier woman, yet he still struggles to let go. He must have loved me deeply. He always said so. How did I get bored with that kind of love? Now, I'm sitting here bitter and gaining weight, knowing it's only a matter of time until he forgets me completely and marries Claudia. She sighed. Bill always said he could forgive the act, but not the betrayal. I lost my perfect life over a few small lies.